My name is Megan Walters. I'm 29 years old, and this is how I took revenge on the people who mocked my dream, humiliated me in front of a whole town, and told me I'd never be anything. Today, I stand behind the counter of my café, Walters & Co., the morning light streaming through the front windows as I pour a honey oat latte for a customer who drove 40 minutes just to get one. The line stretches out the door, customers chatting excitedly, taking photos of the pastries I baked at 4 a.m. with my own two hands. It's busy, loud, warm, the kind of busy that would have made my knees shake just a couple years ago. But now, I thrive in this chaos. I live for it, and I never forget who's sitting at the tables. Because some of them, used to laugh in my face. I glance out at a familiar woman sipping her cappuccino like she doesn't remember calling me delusional in front of 50 people. But I remember all of it. 2 years ago, our town held its annual holiday fundraiser, the kind of small-town event where everyone dresses up, drinks weak punch, and pretends they're better than everyone else. The mayor's wife asked if anyone had ideas for next year's community business grant. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I stood up anyway. I spoke into the microphone with a smile I had practiced in the mirror. I want to open a cafe, a small one, here in town, a place for people to gather, for artists to perform, for the community to come together. Silence, then laughter. First a chuckle from the back, then more. My ex-boyfriend, Aaron, smirked from the refreshments table like I had just announced I was going to the moon. My former best friend, Jill, rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck in her skull. And then the mayor's wife herself, in her glossy pearls and her $1,000 heels, said, "Megan, honey, maybe stick to baking cookies for church." I stood there, microphone shaking in my hand, my heart thudding in my ears like a war drum. I don't even remember how I sat back down, but I do remember the heat in my cheeks, the tears in my eyes. That night, I went home and cried so hard I threw up. I curled up on my kitchen floor next to a cold, half-eaten slice of lemon pound cake and wished I could disappear. But something cracked open inside me that night. Not a break, but a spark. I cleaned my face, drank some water, and stared at my reflection until I could look myself in the eye. And I whispered, "Never again." They thought they broke me, but all they did was build the fire I'd burn them with. I grew up in a small working-class town in Ohio. The kind where everyone knows your name and your business, where reputations are passed down like family recipes and nothing changes unless it's forced to. My mom was a nurse at the local clinic, tough as nails and always smelling like antiseptic and peppermint gum. My dad died when I was 12, a heart attack in the middle of a snowstorm. And after that, it was just me and Mom. We didn't have much, but she made our little house feel like a home. Every Saturday, she'd drop me off at Grandma's while she worked a double shift. That's where I learned to bake, real baking, from scratch. No boxed mixes, no shortcuts. Grandma's arthritic hands still knew how to knead dough like it was therapy. Love goes in the crust, she'd say, brushing flour from my nose. I believed her in high school. I took a part-time job at Daisy's Diner, the only 24-hour spot in town, where I refilled coffee for truckers and fried eggs on a grill. That hadn't been replaced since the 80s. I'd come home at midnight, with grease in my hair, exhausted and somehow more alive than I'd ever felt. That diner is where the dream started. The idea of a place that was mine. Not just a job. A whole space filled with the smell of cinnamon rolls and warm light. Where people could come and feel held. I didn't want to leave town to find something better. I wanted to build better right here. After high school, I scraped together scholarships and went to community college, then culinary school in Columbus. But after just a year away, my mom got sick. Breast cancer. I didn't even hesitate. I packed my bags and came back. She needed me. I worked the night shift at the Shell gas station and waitressed at a bar on weekends, saving every dime I could in a beat-up coffee can labeled one day. Every lunch break, I'd sit in my car, a rusted-out Honda Civic with a broken heater, sketching ideas for my future café. I even had a name picked out. Walters & Co. I imagined the counter, the menu board, the little bookshelf in the corner where people could swap novels. But dreams don't pay bills. So I kept grinding, kept my head down, smiled when people asked if I was still working at the gas station, said yes, and added cream and sugar to their coffee like I hadn't been up all night writing a business plan. Travis was my boyfriend back then, the town's golden boy, quarterback turned real estate agent, the guy everyone assumed I'd marry. We dated for 3 years. He was charming, sure, but Travis liked me best when I played small, when I was his supportive girlfriend, clapping at his open houses, laughing at his jokes. The second I started talking about the cafe seriously, really chasing it, he got uncomfortable. "Don't take this the wrong way, Meg," he'd say, rubbing my back like he was being kind. "But you might be aiming a little too high. It's a tough business." I wanted to believe he meant well. I really did. Then there was Emily, my best friend since 2nd grade. We used to braid each other's hair during recess. Dreamed about being roommates in New York City someday. But Emily changed. Somewhere between graduating and joining the Chamber of Commerce, she became someone I didn't recognize. Polished, dismissive, always networking. When I mentioned my cafe idea over coffee one morning, she gave me this tight smile and said, "You're sweet, Megan, but you need capital and investors. And, let's be real, a name people take seriously." And finally, Pastor Lisa, the smiling snake in a pantsuit. She runs the biggest church in town and chairs every committee she can get her hands on, always offering support to local entrepreneurs. As long as your story makes for good gossip when it fails. She hugged me after the fundraiser disaster, told me, "God gives us all different talents, Megan. Some of us are meant to dream, and some of us are meant to help others see their limits." She said it with her hand on my shoulder like she was blessing me. It took everything in me not to slap it away at the time. I still believed they were my people, my community. I didn't know they saw me as a joke. The town fundraiser was supposed to be a celebration, a feel-good evening at the community center with fairy lights, lukewarm cider, and cheap wine served in plastic cups. I had spent the entire day baking, carefully arranging trays of my best cinnamon rolls, lavender shortbread cookies, and little cards with my name and a sketch of the cafe logo I'd designed myself. I ironed my nicest blouse, practiced my speech in the mirror, and told myself, over and over, "They'll see how serious you are. They'll be proud." I walked in with my head high, my tray of samples balanced in my hands, and hope clenched tight in my chest. When it came time for the open mic, where community members could pitch projects for the annual business grant, I stepped up to the podium. My hands were shaking. I looked out at the crowd, saw Travis leaning against a wall with his drink, Emily whispering something to the mayor's assistant, and Pastor Lisa smiling her tight-lipped smile. I took a breath and spoke. "Hi, I'm Megan Walters, and I want to open a cafe right here in town. A warm, cozy space for people to gather, study, read, with fresh pastries and locally roasted coffee. I smiled, trying to sound confident. I brought samples tonight. Everything homemade. The room was silent for a beat, just long enough to crush the flicker of hope I'd lit in myself. Then, somewhere in the back, a low snicker, Travis, leaned toward Emily and muttered, "Good luck keeping the rats out." She covered her mouth and giggled, her eyes avoiding mine. A few people shuffled in their chairs. One woman raised her eyebrows and said, "She's sweet, but does she even have a business license?" Someone else added, "Who's gonna get coffee from the gas station girl?" I stood frozen, tray still in my hands, trying to smile like it didn't sting. Pastor Lisa approached me after the speeches, laying a perfectly manicured hand on my arm. "Dreams are nice, dear," she said, in that sugary voice of hers. "But not everyone is cut out to be a boss. You should consider joining someone else's venture. Use those baking skills as a blessing for a team." I nodded politely, cheeks burning, the back of my throat tight, but I could feel the heat rising behind my eyes. As I turned to leave, I caught a group near the punch bowl chuckling, one of them whispering, "She'll probably burn the place down before it even opens." I didn't even make it to the parking lot. I bolted to the women's bathroom, slammed into a stall, and locked the door. The tray of cookies hit the floor beside me with a soft thud. I sank to the tile, hugged my knees, and cried harder than I had in years. The kind of cry that comes from the soul, from years of holding back, of pretending you're okay. I sobbed until my chest hurt, until the tears blurred my vision, and the taste of humiliation was thick in my mouth. That night, when I finally got home, I sat on my kitchen floor in my fancy blouse, mascara streaking my cheeks, the smell of cinnamon still clinging to my skin. I stared at the ceiling, my body aching with the weight of it all. The shame, the rejection, the sheer cruelty of people I once trusted. And I made a decision. This was either going to be the end of my dream, or the beginning of my revenge. After that fundraiser, something inside me split clean in two. I stopped waiting for approval. I stopped explaining myself. I threw every ounce of my energy into making the cafe real. No more dreaming, no more sketches. I built a business plan from scratch, stayed up past midnight researching how to write a proposal, how to price coffee, how to make a profit on muffins. Every spare second outside of my shifts at the gas station and the bar went into spreadsheets and budgeting. I believed if I worked hard enough, if I showed the numbers were solid, someone would say yes. But the banks didn't care about my passion. For rejections in a row, I walked out of each sterile office a little smaller than before, gripping printouts no one had really read. Too risky. No collateral. Insufficient income. I heard it all. Meanwhile, my mom's health was declining fast. Her treatments weren't working anymore, and the hospital bills came in thick envelopes marked *urgent*. I stopped opening them after a while. The math never worked. I was drowning in exhaustion, emotionally and financially, and then, like fate, twisting the knife, Travis started dating Emily. They didn't hide it. She posted a picture of them at brunch with the caption, *supporting real business people today*. And he commented, "At least your dreams have investors." The likes rolled in. So did the quiet messages from old classmates. "Hey, you okay?" I wanted to scream. Instead, I logged out of Facebook and didn't look back. Just when I thought I'd hit the end of the road, I stumbled across a listing for a storefront on the edge of town. The building was a disaster. Cracked windows, a sagging roof, graffiti on the walls. But the rent was cheap. Almost suspiciously cheap. I called the number and met the landlord, Mr. Herman, a gruff retired plumber who took one look at me and said, "You sure you're not wasting your time?" "Sweetheart," I told him I didn't have much, but I had a plan. I begged him to give me a chance. He agreed, but only with strict terms. No missed rent, no asking for handouts, and a 6-month clause that let him kick me out if things didn't shape up. I signed the lease with trembling hands. The next morning, I unlocked the front door to my café for the first time. It was freezing inside. The pipes moaned like dying animals, and something dead, probably a raccoon, was wedged in a crawl space. I cried for 20 minutes, then pulled out my phone and typed into YouTube, *how to fix a leaky sink*. That was the start of it. I learned everything. How to paint drywall, how to reseal windows, how to clean mold without poisoning yourself. I bought tools from the pawn shop. I patched, scrubbed, hammered. Some days, I worked 18 hours straight. My hands blistered. My body ached. But every nail I drove into the wall felt like a step away from who they said I was. Then, one morning, I showed up to find someone had spray painted the front of the building. Big, red letters across the boarded windows. *loser latte. It felt like a gut punch. I stood there frozen, holding my bag of tools, the cold wind whipping my hair around my face. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. I wanted to go home. I wanted to scream. Instead, I reached into my pocket, pulled out a black Sharpie, and wrote in thick, shaky letters underneath it. *opening soon. I didn't scrub their words off. I left them there. Let them be the before shot. People started to notice. Not the loud ones. Not the Lisa crowd. But the quiet ones. The kids who hung around the edges of things. The elderly couple who always smiled at me at the diner. Single moms who stopped to ask if I needed help. A retired teacher brought me her old bookshelves. A teen from the local high school painted a mural on the back wall, unpaid, just because I said yes. I made them cinnamon rolls and thanked them with tears in my eyes. My community was forming, not the one that had laughed, but the one that had lived in the shadows, just like me. But life didn't stop testing me. 2 months before opening, my mom passed away, quietly, in her sleep. I was at the cafe when the nurse called. I dropped my hammer and drove straight to the hospital, covered in paint, sobbing the whole way. After the funeral, I couldn't step foot in the cafe. I couldn't bear to look at the half-finished tile, the crooked sign, the oven she never got to see turn on. I stayed in bed for 3 days, numb, broken, directionless. On the 4th day, I opened a storage bin in the garage looking for old photos and found my grandma's recipe box. It was taped shut, worn soft from years of flour and sugar. Inside were index cards in her slanted cursive, pumpkin scones, molasses cookies, her secret peach galette. I held that box in my lap and cried harder than I ever had. That was the moment I came back to life. I didn't just want a cafe anymore. I wanted it to be proof that they were wrong. Every person who called me small, delusional, disposable, every eye roll, every whispered joke, every red spray-painted letter on my windows. I would make something beautiful from the wreckage. I would open those doors, not just for me, but for every person who had ever been underestimated. The cafe opened on a gray Thursday morning, the kind where the sky threatens rain but never quite commits. I didn't make a big announcement. No flyers, no speeches. Just a soft launch and a quiet Instagram post. A picture of the front door with our hand-painted sign, asterisk the rusted spoon asterisk, and the caption, asterisk open. Finally, asterisk a few people trickled. In that first day, a tired-looking nurse on her way home from night shift, an elderly man who said he remembered me from Daisy's Diner, a couple of high schoolers who ordered hot chocolate and stayed for hours doing homework. The lavender latte was a hit. The biscuit sandwiches, made from my grandma's recipe, sold out by noon. Still, most days were slow at first. I'd sit behind the counter during the lull between breakfast and lunch, rereading my grandma's recipes or scrubbing the same spot on the counter just to keep busy. I smiled at every customer like they were the reason I was still standing, because they were. Then, a week in, a local college girl came in and filmed her coffee while raving about the coziest café, hidden at the edge of nowhere, and how the lavender latte tastes like self-worth. She posted it on TikTok. I didn't think much of it until the next morning. I opened the shop to a line down the block. People were driving in from neighboring towns. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Within 3 days, I had to triple my cinnamon roll batches and borrow extra chairs from the church basement. I hired high school kids part-time. I reinvested every dollar I earned into what we needed. Better seating, a fenced-in outdoor patio, string lights, a chalkboard wall where kids could draw while their parents had coffee. We started hosting open mic nights on Fridays. Music, poetry, even a shy teen who sang acoustic covers with trembling hands. One Saturday afternoon, I was topping off drinks when the door opened, and in walked Travis and Emily. They froze in the doorway like they weren't sure they were seeing it right. Emily recovered first, flashing that polished, overly sweet smile. Megan, wow, this place is cute. I met them at the door with the same warm smile I gave every customer. Welcome to the Rusted Spoon. Table for two. They nodded hesitantly, and I led them to a small table by the window. They sat, awkwardly scanning the menu I'd handwritten and laminated myself. Emily asked for an oat milk cappuccino. Travis ordered a black coffee, then looked around like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. The tables were full. People were laughing, reading, sharing plates. My name was written in chalk on the specials board. This wasn't a gas station girl's daydream anymore. When they finished their meal, which they barely touched, I brought the check personally. Tucked underneath it was a small handwritten note on the receipt. I didn't make a show of it, just placed it down and smiled. Emily read it first. Her face went red in an instant. Travis leaned over to see what it said. Then he scoffed. The note read, asterisk dreams are nice, dear, especially when they come true. Asterisk Emily stared down at it like it had insulted her personally. Travis muttered, under his breath, this place won't last. I smiled, cleared the empty plates, and said, neither did we. They left without another word. 2 weeks later, I got an email from the Chamber of Commerce, the organizer of the annual town fundraiser, the very same one where I was laughed off the mic, asked if asterisk the Rusted Spoon asterisk would be willing to cater this year's event. I stared at the screen for a full minute, unsure if it was a joke. But it wasn't. They offered to pay full price. They wanted my food, my name. I said yes. The night of the event, I wore a black dress and an apron tied around my waist. I stood behind a long table filled with miniature scones, lavender shortbread, and tiny biscuit sliders. The crowd buzzed with polite compliments and full mouths. I recognized nearly every face. The mayor, Pastor Lisa, People who had once smirked and whispered. People now coming back for thirds. When they called me up to say a few words, I walked to the podium slowly, holding the microphone. Like a memory. Thank you, I began, scanning the room. Thank you for letting me serve you tonight. I paused, my heart calm for the first time in a long while. And thank you, I added, voice steady, for teaching me what it feels like to be underestimated. I built this cafe from your doubt, and now I serve it by the cup. Life after the grand opening didn't slow down. If anything, it bloomed. The Rusted Spoon became more than a cafe. It became a home for people like me, dreamers who'd been told no, who'd been laughed at, who'd been underestimated. I started hosting weekend baking workshops, partnering with local women who wanted to learn how to turn their love for food into something tangible. Some came with notepads and questions. Others just came to remember what it felt like to create something with their hands. I hired single moms who needed flexible hours, high schoolers with ambition in their eyes, and a quiet young man who told me, on his first day, people usually look through me, but you didn't. The community grew in ways I couldn't have imagined. One day, a writer from a regional food magazine came in on a whim, ordered a cinnamon roll, and asked if she could do a feature. A month later, our story, my story, was printed on glossy pages. Under the headline, *The cafe that rose from laughter. After that, we started getting visitors from 2-3 towns over. People who read about the little cafe that refused to fold. They came for the coffee. Sure, but mostly, they came for the feeling. The warmth, the grit. One afternoon, I got a call from Pastor Lisa. She wanted to book the cafe for her women's book club. I remembered her voice instantly, the way she had once told me that dreams were nice, but some people were meant to stay small. I didn't hesitate. I smiled, even as I said, I'm so sorry, Pastor Lisa. We're booked solid with real supporters. She paused, caught off guard, then said something about maybe trying again in the fall. I wish her well and hung up. Emily still makes her presence known in small, sour ways. Instagram stories filled with vague quotes about betrayal and people who pretend to be successful. A few of my staff members asked if I was going to respond. I just laughed and said, why would I? I didn't need to clap back. I had a line out the door. As for Travis, his real estate business dried up slowly, like a pond under sun. Too many shady deals, too many burned bridges. Last I heard, he packed up and moved to Columbus to start fresh. No one seemed to miss him. No one really noticed he was gone. Some nights, after we close, I'll sit on the bench out front